Hey, Calvary family. Great to be with you on this Thursday. I'm up on a church patio. A family generously donated this to the church, and it's a great spot. You come up, spend some time with Jesus up here when you have free time. It's a great place. But hey, we are in an amazing season. I think we all know that. Just the ways that God is moving among us is incredible. The amount of people that are responding to the gospel each week. I mean, the baptisms alone, the transformation that's going on all around us. It is a privilege to be living in the times that we're living in. And I mean, there's dark things happening us all around us, the culture and the world, no doubt about it. And there is a lot of darkness, and there's a lot of people that play on the darkness, and they monger fear according to that darkness, and all that, like acting as if we have no God. But the world has never been, we look around, it's never really been so destabilized since World War II. And I guess you can argue that the threats we face in the world today are greater than any other generation. I mean, just a couple of nations, a few nations have the capacity to destroy the entire planet, or, so they think. I mean, people always think small because God's left out of their power plays. But as I look at the move of God among us in this dark time, like light, right, in the midst of darkness. I'm reminded of Hezekiah. He was one of the great kings of Israel, like one of two. Maybe you could argue three, that some people do. But I mean, King David and Hezekiah were two kings that finished well. Lots of kings started out well, but they finished lousy. But Hezekiah was one of the exceptions. He finished well as well. And when he came into power, the one who was before him, his father, was Ahaz, and he had led the nation into apostasy and all of that. Ahaz was the same one we talked about a couple of weeks ago from Isaiah 7:9, where God said to Ahaz, "If you will not believe, surely you will not be established." Well, Hezekiah, his son, took God up on that offer. Like, okay, God, if I won't believe, I won't be established. But if I do believe, then I will be established. And he took up God up on that offer. And, that's an offer that's made to all peoples of all generation, being established because we trust in God. Well, Hezekiah comes into power, and he does what no king has done before him. He tears down the high places. These are the places in Israel and Judah where people went to make sacrifices on altars. There are places where before Israel, when the Canaanites lived in the land, or they reigned in the land, that's where they went to go and worship. Some of the places had idols on them, other places didn't, but there were altars there, and people would go up there and they would make sacrifices up there because they went up there to secure for themselves prosperity, fertility, pleasure, wealth, military strength, and all those kinds of things, the things they trusted these gods to do. The interesting thing about the worship of these gods that Israel worshipped is that at the same time they were worshiping them, they were also worshiping God, like Yahweh, God. So Israel never said at any point in time, or Judah never said at any time that they had abandoned God or his ways. I mean, they just thought the prophets were idiots. They would just say, we go to the temple all the time to worship. Of course we worship Yahweh. We recite his word to our kids. We sing his songs. They had all the religious stuff going. Yeah, and at the same time, they went up on these high places to worship as well because they thought they needed this to secure, a good life for themselves. Now, actually, the idols, of course, they represented gods, and that's a study in itself. But Hezekiah knew that God would have no other gods before him. So he went after these high places, called people back to worship God alone. And it was just an awesome, awesome time. Hezekiah led the way of revival, and it truly was a revival. So, I mean, you could argue whichever way it went, whether the revival was going on and the places got torn down or how it went about. But anyway, whenever God moves, so does the kingdom of darkness. And this time, the kingdom of darkness was in the form of the Assyrians. This darkness will always come against light. It's just the way of it. The solution is so opposite of what we might automatically think. When we see darkness, we might think, well, the way to combat darkness is to fight. That's what you need to make a stand. You need to defend the light. And I get it. Like if you're losing ground like Judah was, the Syrians are moving in and it doesn't seem like God's stopping it. I mean, what do? You try to bolster up your defenses, right? You squint at the powers around you and you make alliances with them. Egypt, right? Remember Egypt, the place they came out of? They tried to make an alliance with them. It didn't work. And then they tried ghettoizing themselves. They built up their walls. They strengthened themselves within their walls. But Assyria still surrounded Jerusalem, took over other areas of Judah. Now they're coming against the capital, Jerusalem, the city of God. Fabulous account. It's in Isaiah 36 and Isaiah 37. But it comes to this point, as it comes to a point in everyone's life, but this was to Hezekiah, where the options were all gone. And the forces of darkness are just seeming like they're completely overwhelming. And like Hezekiah, Israel, Judah, they just need a move from God. Well, Assyria's forces surround Jerusalem. There's no way out. It's impossible upon impossible. The commander of the Assyrian army start trash talking Hezekiah. Isaiah 36, I'm just going to read a few verses here. Verse 4, it says, then Rabshakeh, he's the commander, said to them, say now to Hezekiah, thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, what confidence is this in which you seek? I say, you speak of having plans and power for war, but they're mere words. Now, in whom do you trust? And whom do you trust that you rebel against me? Look, you're trusting in the staff of this broken reed, Egypt, on which if a man leans, it'll go into his hand and pierce it. And so is Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, to those who trust in him. And, they tried to trust in Egypt, but that just failed. And he goes on, verse 6, he says, look, you're trusting in, or verse 7, he says, but if you say to me, we trust in Yahweh our God, is it not he whose high places and who altars Hezekiah has taken away and said to Judah and Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar? And then he goes on and all that stuff. But the Assyrians, they knew, they heard. And now they're appealing to the people. Like, maybe you shouldn't have gone all out in the worship of God the way that you did. Maybe you should have kept some of those places of prosperity, pleasure, of security, those gods on the high hills there. Well, the account is like one of my favorites. You go and read it, Isaiah 36, 37. This commander, Rabshakeh, writes a letter to Hezekiah, trash-talking God and a devotion that Hezekiah has towards God. And so what does Hezekiah do? Well, he takes this letter, which represents all the forces that are coming against him, and he goes into the temple and he gets on his face before God. And in essence, he presents this letter before him and he says, here, God, this letter is for you. He just leaves the letter before God. It's so awesome. And then God did what only God can do, right? He defeated the Assyrians. He did. Not one arrow was fired. Not one person had to go head to head with another person. Not one person had to fight their way out of darkness, out of the negativity, out of the fears, the doubts, and all of that. God did it. It wasn't from forming alliances with Egypt or any other powers. It wasn't by trying to beat back the powers. It wasn't by trying to even make a stand against the powers. It was by simply turning the lights on. Go before God. God is light. So he hands over the letter to God, and Hezekiah is basically saying, I'm letting go of control, God. I'm letting go of my own abilities. This is bigger than me. I look to you and you alone. And then God defeated the darkness by simply being like who he is. It's the same with us. Darkness is just the absence of life. You can't drive out darkness by your own strength, by your own power, or by alliances. It's not going to happen. It's like if you went into a dark room. You don't go in with a baseball bat trying to beat back the darkness. You don't try to make alliances, get a whole bunch of people together and let's go yell at the darkness or something. You just simply go in and turn on the lights. And so, as we see God moving so amazingly among us, know this, that the darkness wants to destroy the work that God's doing. And so, like for us personally, take the threats, keep a short leash on them, take the warnings of destructions or the feelings of powerlessness or the negative self talk, bring them before God and just say, here, God, this is for you. I mean, write them down if you need to, right? Write down the oppressions or the things that bring anxiety, fear, stress. Write them down. Find a quiet place where it's just you and Jesus and hand them over to him. Say, here, Lord, these are yours, and turn on the lights. That's all that's to it. Hey, well, God bless you guys. Thanks for spending this time with me. I'll see you all on Sunday. We're going to be talking about how can I hear God and looking at that in respect to prayer. All right, see you then.